The night was quiet in the luxury apartment tower, but inside the elevator shaft, the silence was about to be broken by a scream that would haunt everyone who heard it. Anna, 9 months pregnant and exhausted, stood in front of the elevator with her husband, David. She leaned against the cold wall, holding her belly as another contraction tightened her body. She looked at him with pleading eyes, expecting comfort, expecting protection. But instead, she saw a face she barely recognized anymore. David's eyes were not warm. They were sharp, restless, filled with something dark that she had ignored for too long. He reached for her arm, his grip firm enough to make her stumble. "David, please. It hurts," she whispered, trying to catch her breath. Her voice trembled, full of trust mixed with confusion. The elevator doors slid open. Inside was nothing but shadows and the low hum of machinery. Anna stepped forward hesitantly, but David's hand didn't guide her with care. It shoved her, sudden and merciless. Her body lurched forward. The world tilted. She screamed, her hands flailing to hold on to something, anything. But the polished steel walls gave her nothing. Her voice echoed as the elevator floor shuddered and dropped beneath her. "David," she cried, terror and betrayal colliding in her voice. He stood there, unmoving, his face stone cold. The elevator cables groaned. The metal box shook violently as it began its deadly descent. Anna's scream rose with the sound of screeching steel. She fell against the wall, clutching her belly as pain ripped through her body. Her unborn child kicked desperately inside her, as though sensing the danger, as though fighting alongside her. The lights inside flickered, then went dark. In the suffocating blackness, only Anna's ragged breathing and the pounding of her heart filled the air. She tried to pray, tried to call for help, but the sound of rushing gravity drowned her out. Images of her life flashed in fragments, her childhood, her wedding day, the moment she first saw the baby's heartbeat on the screen. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the man she loved had just chosen to end her life. "Please, my baby," she whispered through broken sobs. "Stay with me." The elevator plummeted faster, every second pulling her closer to the unthinkable. Her hands pressed against her belly, her whole body trembling with pain and fear. Somewhere above, the cables snapped one by one like thunderclaps in the night. David, still standing at the doors, turned his back without a flicker of remorse. To him, the silence that followed would mean freedom, wealth, and the erasure of a wife he no longer wanted. But the silence was not complete. From the darkness below came one final heart-stopping scream. Louder, sharper, more desperate than any cry before. It cut through the air, chilling enough to make the hairs rise on anyone nearby. And then, there was nothing but the echo of her voice as the elevator slammed into the abyss. Before the nightmare in the elevator, Anna Nguyen lived a life that seemed simple on the outside, but carried the weight of quiet struggles. At 29, she worked as an elementary school teacher, pouring her heart into the classroom each day. Her students adored her because she treated every child like her own. She would kneel beside them when they cried, clap with them when they succeeded, and stay late grading papers even while her swollen feet begged for rest. Anna's greatest joy, however, was not in the classroom. It was in the new life growing inside her. At 8 months pregnant, she glowed with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. She had decorated the nursery herself, painting the walls a gentle shade of yellow, placing stuffed animals carefully around the crib, and folding tiny baby clothes with trembling hands. Every detail reflected her love, her hope, and her belief that the future would be brighter once her son arrived. But while Anna dreamed of family, the cracks in her marriage were becoming impossible to ignore. David, her husband of 4 years, had once been charming and attentive. He used to bring her flowers after long days at school, whisper promises about building a life together, and kiss her forehead as though she was the most precious thing in the world. Somewhere along the way, that tenderness disappeared. He came home late more often, his phone glued to his hand, his eyes cold whenever she asked where he had been. The warmth in his voice turned into impatience. "Stop nagging me," he would snap when she asked for help carrying groceries, even though her belly made it nearly impossible to bend or lift. Still, Anna clung to the hope that the baby would bring them closer again. She told herself he was stressed from work, that things would change once their child was born. At night, she wrote in her diary, pouring out dreams that her husband never wanted to hear. "Dear baby," she scribbled one evening, her handwriting shaky, "I don't know what your father thinks of me anymore, but I know you'll love me, and I promise I will love you more than anything." Her younger sister, Mai, often visited, sensing the loneliness Anna tried to hide. "You're strong, Anna," Mai whispered, holding her hand. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." But Anna was tired. The sleepless nights, the silent dinners, the feeling of being invisible in her own home, it all wore her down. She longed for the husband who once adored her, the man who promised he would never let her fall. And yet, in her deepest heart, she couldn't ignore the growing fear that something darker was unfolding. David's eyes lingered on her stomach with a strange detachment, as though the child she carried wasn't a blessing, but a burden. Still, Anna held on. She believed love would be enough. She believed her marriage could survive. She believed the man she once knew was still hidden inside the stranger beside her. She had no idea that the very man she trusted would soon choose to end her life instead of saving it. To the outside world, Anna and David looked like the picture of happiness. They lived in a modern apartment high above the city, with glass walls that caught the evening light. Neighbors often saw David holding Anna's hand as they walked into the building. At gatherings, he wrapped his arm around her shoulder and spoke softly, making it seem as if he was the perfect, attentive husband. "Anna is my everything," he would say with a charming smile, drawing envious looks from friends who thought their marriage was flawless. He ordered her favorite dishes at restaurants, pulled out her chair, and even posted pictures of her glowing pregnancy on social media with captions like, "Counting down the days until we meet our little prince." But behind closed doors, the mask slipped. The man who appeared gentle in public grew colder each night at home. The arm around her shoulder turned into a hand that brushed her aside. The tender voice became a sharp tone filled with irritation. When Anna tried to talk about baby names, he pretended not to hear. When she showed him the tiny socks she had bought, he scoffed, muttering that she was wasting money. The contrast was cruel. To outsiders, David seemed devoted. To Anna, he felt like a stranger. Yet she never revealed this truth to anyone. She smiled at neighbors, posed for photos, and kept telling herself that things would get better. There was one evening that revealed just how calculated David's performance had become. Anna had prepared a simple dinner, her favorite soup, simmered for hours. She sat waiting, the baby shifting inside her, eager to share a peaceful night. When David arrived, he looked exhausted, but unusually cheerful. He kissed her forehead, pulling out a chair for her. "You've been working too hard," he said with a smile that almost felt real. Anna's heart swelled with relief. Maybe, just maybe, the husband she loved had returned. But later that night, after Anna had gone to bed, she woke to the sound of his voice in the next room. The door was cracked just enough for her to see him on the phone, his back turned. His voice was low, but the words sliced through her like glass. "She trusts me completely," he said with a chuckle. "By the time it's over, no one will suspect a thing." Anna's breath caught in her throat. Who was he talking to? What did he mean by over? She pressed a hand to her belly, her heart racing. The man she depended on was hiding something, something dangerous. She wanted to confront him, but fear tied her tongue. Instead, she pretended to sleep when he entered the room. He kissed her cheek gently, the same lips that had just spoken betrayal. To everyone else, David was still the perfect husband. But Anna now felt the first chilling certainty that her marriage was not only broken, it was a trap she couldn't escape. And the person pulling the strings of that trap was the very man who once vowed to protect her for life. Just when Anna thought her world could not feel lonelier, someone new appeared in her life. Lisa Hong, a vibrant 27-year-old woman, entered with the warmth of an old friend and the charm of someone who seemed to understand everything Anna was going through. They met by chance, or at least that was how it seemed. One afternoon, Anna sat on a bench near the apartment garden, massaging her swollen feet after a long day. Lisa appeared with a bright smile and a kind voice. "You look like you could use some company," she said, offering Anna a cold bottle of water. From that moment, Lisa became a regular presence. She checked in often, asking about the baby, complimenting Anna's glow, even helping carry groceries upstairs. Anna, desperate for kindness in the middle of her struggles, welcomed her with open arms. "It feels good to have a friend around," Anna admitted one day, her eyes misty. Lisa squeezed her hand and replied, "You're not alone anymore." But Lisa's comfort was nothing more than a mask. Behind closed doors, when Anna wasn't watching, Lisa's smile hardened into something cruel. She wasn't just a neighbor or a friend. She was David's secret lover, the woman he had chosen while his pregnant wife fought exhaustion and loneliness. Their relationship had begun months earlier, built on deceit and shared greed. Together, they whispered plans in hotel rooms, discussing not only their affair but also their growing impatience for Anna to disappear. Still, Lisa played her role flawlessly. She listened when Anna shared her worries about David's distance. "Maybe he's just stressed," Lisa would suggest softly, planting seeds of doubt while hiding her own laughter. She encouraged Anna to keep trusting him, all while slipping into his arms the moment Anna turned her back. One evening, Anna invited Lisa for dinner. The table was set simply but warmly, with candles flickering and soft music in the background. Anna talked about baby names, her voice filled with fragile hope. Lisa nodded, smiling sweetly, but her eyes flickered with something darker whenever David entered the room. David barely looked at his wife that night. Instead, he brushed past Anna's shoulder with cold indifference, only to share a fleeting glance with Lisa when he thought no one noticed. That glance said everything, a silent confession of betrayal hidden in plain sight. Anna felt the chill of it but refused to believe what her heart was screaming. Instead, she clung to Lisa's words of comfort, blind to the knife being twisted behind her back. Late that same night, when Anna was asleep, Lisa met David in the dim parking garage. She leaned against his car, her smile sharp. "She trusts me completely," Lisa whispered, echoing his earlier words. "When the time comes, she'll never see it coming." David smirked, slipping his arm around her waist. "Good, keep it that way." And in that moment, their cruel alliance tightened, sealing Anna's fate while she lay dreaming upstairs, still believing Lisa was her friend. At first, the changes were subtle. David no longer greeted Anna with a kiss when he returned home. Instead, he walked past her, loosening his tie, his phone buzzing in his hand. When she asked how his day had been, his replies were clipped, often nothing more than a grunt. Anna tried to brush it off. "He's just tired," she whispered to herself as she folded baby clothes on the couch. She wanted to believe it was stress, that fatherhood was weighing on him in ways he didn't know how to express. But deep down, a quiet ache grew heavier each day. The distance widened. Anna noticed how quickly he grew irritated when she asked for help. Carrying groceries up the stairs with her swollen belly left her breathless. Yet when she asked him to lend a hand, he snapped, "You're exaggerating. It's just a few bags." The sharpness in his tone cut deeper than any physical pain she felt. Meals became silent. Anna would set the table, her heart hopeful that tonight would be different. But David scrolled on his phone throughout dinner, barely glancing at her. When she tried to share the baby's first kicks, he muttered, "I'll feel it later," before walking away. Later never came. The nights were the hardest. Anna would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of David's footsteps pacing in the living room. Sometimes she heard him laughing softly into the phone, his voice gentler than it had been with her in months. When she asked who he was talking to, he brushed it off with a cold, "Work." One evening, Anna gathered her courage. She placed her hand on his arm and said, "David, I feel like we're drifting apart. Please talk to me. I need you." He pulled away. His eyes, once warm, now held irritation. "You're being dramatic, Anna. Stop acting like a child." The words crushed her. She sat on the edge of the bed, tears spilling silently as she clutched her belly. She whispered to her unborn baby, "It's okay, little one. Mommy's here, even if Daddy isn't." Days turned into weeks, and the betrayal grew harder to ignore. Anna noticed lipstick smudges on his collar that were not hers, the faint smell of perfume lingering on his jacket. When she confronted him, his anger exploded. "Are you accusing me? After everything I do for this family?" His voice thundered through the apartment, leaving her trembling and afraid to press further. Anna began to wither. The joyful glow of pregnancy dimmed under the weight of neglect. She smiled less, laughed less, her spirit fading as she carried both her child and the burden of a husband slipping away. But the cruelest wound came one night when she overheard him again on the phone. His voice was soft, tender, filled with affection she hadn't heard in months. "I miss you," he whispered. Anna's chest tightened. Those words weren't meant for her. And in that moment, Anna finally realized the man she loved was giving his heart to someone else. Lisa had a talent for slipping into Anna's life at just the right moments. When David grew distant, Lisa appeared with comforting words. When Anna cried alone in her apartment, Lisa arrived with tea, a smile, and an eagerness to listen. To Anna, it felt like fate. To Lisa, it was strategy. "Marriage is hard," Lisa said one afternoon as they sat on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Anna rubbed her swollen belly, her eyes misty. "He doesn't even look at me anymore," Anna whispered. Lisa tilted her head sympathetically, pretending to care. "Well, men, they get stressed. Maybe he's under pressure at work. Or maybe—" Lisa let her voice trail off, her eyes filled with false hesitation. Anna leaned closer, desperate for answers. "Maybe what?" Lisa sighed, lowering her gaze. "Maybe he feels trapped. You know, the baby, the responsibilities. Some men can't handle it." The words stung like poison. Anna shook her head quickly. "No, David wanted this baby too." But doubt crept in, weaving itself around her heart. Lisa watched it take root, hiding her satisfaction behind a gentle smile. Over the weeks, Lisa continued to feed Anna carefully chosen words. "He's probably working late because he doesn't want to argue. You know how men avoid things when they feel suffocated." Or, "Don't take it personally if he's distant. Sometimes men just need other outlets." Each phrase chipped away at Anna's confidence. She began questioning herself, wondering if she had done something wrong, if she wasn't enough for David anymore. At night, she stared into the mirror, studying her tired eyes, her swollen body, her stretch marks. "Maybe he doesn't find me beautiful anymore," she whispered to the reflection, tears streaming down her cheeks. Lisa was always there to comfort her, never revealing that she was the very outlet David had chosen. She would bring flowers, cook meals, laugh with Anna about trivial things, all while knowing her betrayal cut deeper than any strangers could. One evening, Anna broke down completely. She clutched Lisa's hand, sobbing, "I don't know who he is anymore. I feel like I'm losing him." Lisa squeezed her hand tightly, her expression solemn. "Anna, listen to me. You deserve to know the truth. If he's hiding something, you need to be prepared." Anna froze, her chest tightening. "Hiding something? What do you mean?" Lisa leaned back, eyes glinting in the dim light. "I'm not saying he is. But sometimes when men change like this, it's because they're seeing someone else." The words shattered Anna. She shook her head violently, refusing to believe it. No, David would never. But deep inside, her heart cracked open, unable to dismiss the fear. Lisa placed a hand on her shoulder, masking her cruel delight with feigned concern. "Just be careful. If there's another woman, you'll find out eventually." Anna's tears fell harder. She hugged Lisa, whispering, "Thank you for being here. I don't know what I'd do without you." Lisa's smile, hidden in the shadows, was sharp as a knife, and while Anna clung to her, blind with grief, she had no idea that the other woman was sitting right beside her. When the lights were off and the apartment sank into silence, Anna's real life began. The world only saw the smiling teacher, the glowing expectant mother, the wife of a successful man. But alone in her bedroom, Anna carried a loneliness that weighed more than her swollen belly ever could. She began keeping a diary, hidden inside the drawer of her nightstand. Its pages became the only place where she could pour out her heartbreak without fear of judgment. The first entry was written with shaky hands late one night when David returned home past midnight, smelling of perfume that was not hers. "Dear baby," she wrote, her tears staining the page, "I don't know what's happening to us. Your father barely looks at me anymore. I try to smile, but inside I'm breaking. I want you to know, even if he doesn't love me, I will love you with everything I have." The act of writing became her therapy. Every night, after David brushed past her without a word, after Lisa left with her fake smiles, Anna sat down with her pen. She wrote about her fears, her hopes, her dreams for her unborn son. She confessed things she could not say out loud, not even to her sister Mai. "Sometimes I wonder if I am the problem," one entry read. "Maybe I'm not beautiful enough. Maybe I talk too much. Maybe the baby made me less of the woman he wanted. She paused after writing, her hand trembling as she stared at her reflection in the darkened window. The woman who looked back at her was pale, tired, a shadow of the vibrant girl David once chased. But not every page was sorrow. Some were filled with quiet joy. She described the first time she felt her baby kick, the flutter that made her gasp with wonder. "It was like you were reminding me you're here, fighting with me," she wrote. "You are my reason to keep breathing." In those words, Anna found strength. She pressed her hand to her belly often, whispering promises to her child. "No matter what happens, I will protect you. You will never feel unloved." Still, the silence of the apartment grew heavier. Each time David laughed into his phone in another room, each time Lisa offered her sly words of comfort, Anna returned to her diary, pouring out her despair. The book grew thicker, each page carrying the weight of a woman who felt trapped in her own marriage. One stormy night, as rain battered the windows, Anna wrote with a sense of finality. "If something happens to me, my sweet boy, I pray you will grow up strong. I pray you will know the truth one day, that your mother loved you with all her heart, even if her own heart was broken." She closed the diary, kissed it, and placed it beneath her pillow. For the first time she wondered if she should share it with Mai, as if preparing her for something she could not yet name. And as thunder cracked outside, Anna could not shake the haunting feeling that her darkest fears were about to come true. While Anna poured her sorrow into her diary, David and Lisa were weaving a plan that would silence her forever. Their meetings became more daring, their whispers sharper, their patience wearing thin. One evening, David and Lisa met at a quiet cafe across town, far from the apartment building where Anna rested uneasily. The place was dimly lit, filled with the hum of distant chatter, but their table was a world of its own. David leaned across the table, his jaw tight. "I can't keep living like this," he muttered. "She clings to me, she cries, she looks at me like I'm the monster. I can't stand it anymore." Lisa reached across, placing her hand over his. Her nails pressed lightly into his skin, a reminder of her grip on him. "Then let's end it," she whispered. "We've talked about this long enough. You said you wanted freedom. I want it too, and we both know the baby means she'll always be tied to you, unless—" Her words lingered like poison in the air. David's eyes flickered with hesitation, but the temptation was stronger than his guilt. He imagined a life without Anna. No more tears, no more diary pages, no more nagging voice asking where he had been. Just Lisa, the thrill of her touch, and the wealth Anna's death would leave behind. They spoke in low tones, careful but deliberate. Lisa's voice was steady, ruthless. "Accidents happen all the time. Elevators break, wires snap, things fall apart. No one would question it. People will call it tragic, but no one will blame you." David swallowed hard. The thought of killing the woman who once loved him sent a shiver down his spine, but Lisa's words wrapped around him like a chain. "You'll finally be free," she added, her eyes gleaming. From that night, their secret conspiracy tightened. Lisa began distracting Anna more often, keeping her occupied, making sure she stayed vulnerable. David studied the routines in their building, watching the elevator, noting its creaks and shudders, already imagining the perfect moment when Anna would step inside. At home, Anna remained blissfully unaware of the danger circling her. She still tried to win back her husband's affection, still smiled faintly at Lisa's visits, still believed her worst fears were only in her head. But in whispered phone calls, behind closed doors, David and Lisa rehearsed every detail. They planned the timing, the setting, the alibi. Lisa would ensure Anna didn't suspect a thing. David would make the final move. One night, as they met in the parking garage, Lisa leaned against David's car, her face lit by the pale glow of a streetlight. "It has to look natural," she said firmly. "No mess, no loose ends. She's already weak. It won't take much." David's hand trembled slightly as he lit a cigarette. "And the baby?" Lisa's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Collateral damage." David inhaled deeply, exhaling into the night, his mind already closing the door on the life he had built with Anna. Neither of them realized that fate, and the child they dismissed so easily, would change everything. The evening of the betrayal arrived like any other. The city glowed with streetlights, the hum of cars rising through the air. Inside the apartment, Anna struggled to slip her shoes on. Her belly, now heavy and low, made every step difficult. She was tired, but David insisted they step out together. "A short walk will be good for you," he said, his voice unusually soft. For a moment, Anna allowed herself to believe him. She smiled faintly, thinking maybe, just maybe, the husband she loved was returning. She took his arm, hoping the walk would bring them closer again. They descended toward the lobby in silence. David's grip on her arm was steady, almost too steady, as if guiding her every move. Anna leaned into him, wincing as another contraction pressed through her body. "David," she whispered, "I think it's almost time. The baby, he's coming soon." David's eyes flickered, but his expression stayed calm. "Don't worry," he said flatly. "Everything will be over soon." The elevator doors slid open with a metallic groan. Anna hesitated at the threshold, a strange unease settling over her. The box seemed darker than usual, its lights flickering, its hum louder. She pressed her hand to her belly, glancing up at her husband. "David, are you sure it's safe? This elevator sounds—" Before she could finish, his hand shoved her firmly in the back. Anna stumbled forward, gasping. The sudden force knocked her balance off completely. Her swollen body crashed into the side wall of the elevator. Her eyes widened in disbelief, turning back to face him. "David, what are you?" But his face was cold, unreadable. The doors began to close. Anna staggered to her feet, panic flooding her veins. "Please, don't leave me," she screamed, her voice cracking. David didn't move. His hand hovered near the close button, his eyes locked on hers. For one brief second, Anna thought she saw a flicker of hesitation, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. The doors sealed shut with a chilling thud. The elevator jerked violently, and then it dropped. Anna screamed as the floor lurched beneath her. She clutched her belly, her knees buckling under the sudden force. The lights overhead flickered madly, casting shadows across her terrified face. The cables above groaned, snapping one by one like gunshots. The air filled with the deafening roar of metal grinding against metal. She fell against the wall, sobbing, "My baby! Please God, save my baby!" Her cries echoed through the shaft, but no one came. Above, David stood motionless in the hallway, listening to the distant sound of her screams fading into the abyss. His chest rose and fell slowly, as though he had just unburdened himself. The building trembled faintly as the elevator continued its deadly plunge. Anna's final scream rose, piercing, heartbreaking, carrying both fear and love. And then, with a thunderous crash, the elevator slammed into the depths below, leaving only silence where her voice had been. The crash of the elevator shook the entire building. Residents rushed out of their apartments, panic spreading like fire. Shouts echoed through the lobby as people screamed for help. Security guards called emergency services, their voices trembling as they reported the accident. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the night. Paramedics swarmed into the lobby, racing toward the wreckage. The elevator doors had crumpled inward like paper, metal twisted and sparking. Inside, Anna's broken body was found among the debris, barely clinging to life. "Pulse is weak," one medic shouted. "She's critical. Move, move." They carried her out on a stretcher, her face pale, her lips whispering words no one could understand. Her hand clutched her belly even in unconsciousness, her body trembling from the effort of holding on. Blood stained her clothes, mixing with the dust of shattered steel. The ambulance tore through the streets, lights flashing, sirens wailing. Inside, the paramedics fought desperately. "She's going into labor," one cried. Another pressed oxygen to her face. Anna's body convulsed as the contraction hit, her child fighting to enter a world already drenched in tragedy. At the hospital, the doors burst open. Doctors and nurses surrounded her, shouting orders, their hands moving with frantic speed. "Prep for emergency C-section. We're losing her." Through it all, Anna drifted in and out of consciousness. She felt the sting of needles, the weight of hands pressing on her chest, the blinding light above. In her fading mind, she whispered to the child inside her, "Stay strong, my baby. Please live, even if I can't." Moments stretched like hours. Machines beeped wildly, voices rose and fell, and then, finally, the sound that pierced the chaos was the fragile cry of a newborn. A baby's wail filled the sterile air, small but fierce, echoing like a promise. "It's a boy!" the nurse shouted, lifting the tiny child into trembling hands. Relief rippled through the room, but it was short-lived. The monitors at Anna's bedside flatlined. "Code blue," a doctor yelled. They pressed on her chest, pumped air into her lungs, begged her to hold on. But Anna's body, broken and exhausted, could no longer fight. Her eyes fluttered open one last time, gazing at the blurred figure of her newborn child. A tear slid down her cheek, and then she was gone. Silence swept over the room. Nurses bowed their heads, doctors stepped back, defeated. The baby's cries grew louder, as if calling for the mother who could no longer answer. Outside the operating room, Anna's younger sister Mai arrived, her face pale with terror. She froze as a nurse approached, cradling the tiny baby wrapped in a white blanket. Tears filled her eyes as she held her nephew for the first time. The nurse's voice was soft, but the words cut like glass. "I'm so sorry, we couldn't save her." Mai clutched the child against her chest, sobbing uncontrollably. "Don't worry, Anna," she whispered through her tears. "I'll raise him. He'll know how much you loved him." And as the baby's cries echoed through the hospital, a silent vow was made. He would one day carry the truth of his mother's death. News of Anna's death spread quickly through the community. Neighbors wept openly, remembering the kind teacher who always carried a smile. Her students drew pictures of her with angel wings, taping them to the school gates. The city mourned her as a tragic victim of a senseless accident. But no one mourned louder, no one wept harder than David. At the funeral, he played the part flawlessly. Dressed in a black suit, his face pale with supposed anguish, he clutched a handkerchief and dabbed at eyes that had shed no real tears. He spoke softly to guests, shaking hands, receiving embraces with a trembling voice. "She was my whole world," he repeated again and again, the words rehearsed until they sounded almost believable. When Mai entered, carrying the newborn child, David rushed forward dramatically. He placed a hand on his son's tiny head, bowing as if overcome with grief. "I'll take care of him," he whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. The mourners nodded approvingly, touched by his display of devotion. But behind his mask of sorrow, David's thoughts were far from grief. Late at night, after the mourners were gone and the candles had burned low, he sat in the living room with a glass of whiskey in his hand. His tears dried quickly, replaced with a smirk as he stared at the flickering shadows on the wall. Anna was gone. The plan had worked. The path to freedom and to Lisa was finally open. Lisa joined him after the funeral, slipping into his arms like a shadow. "You played your part perfectly," she murmured, her lips brushing his ear. "They all believe you." David chuckled darkly. "Of course they do. Who would suspect the grieving husband? I'm untouchable." But even as he spoke, a nagging unease clawed at the back of his mind. He remembered Anna's final scream, the desperate look in her eyes as the elevator doors closed. It haunted him, echoing in his dreams, making him wake in a cold sweat. He pushed the memory down with another swallow of whiskey, convincing himself it was only guilt, something time would wash away. Mai, however, was not so easily fooled. She sat quietly during the funeral, her eyes red from crying, but her gaze sharp whenever it landed on David. Something about his performance felt too polished, too controlled. She noticed how his tears came only when people were watching, how his arms tightened around Lisa a moment too long when they greeted. That night, as she rocked her nephew to sleep, she whispered to him, "I don't trust him, and one day I'll prove what he did." But David remained confident in his performance. He smiled to himself as he tucked away Anna's life insurance papers, already planning how to spend the money. He told Lisa that soon they could move away, start fresh, and never look back. What he didn't realize was that Anna's death had left behind more than grief. It had planted a seed of suspicion that would one day grow into his downfall. For weeks after Anna's funeral, the apartment building remained heavy with grief. Residents carried flowers to the memorial table in the lobby, where Anna's picture sat framed by flickering candles. Children left little drawings, neighbors whispered prayers. Everyone agreed it was a tragedy no family should ever endure. Everyone, that is, except for the quiet few who began to notice details that didn't quite add up. Mrs. Tran, an elderly neighbor who often shared afternoon tea with Anna, told her daughter, "I saw David with that young woman before Anna died. Too close for just friends." Her daughter brushed it off at first, but the seed was planted. Soon, others began sharing similar observations. David's late nights, Lisa's sudden presence in Anna's life, the coldness in his eyes whenever his wife wasn't looking. Mai, grieving her sister while caring for the baby, noticed even more. At first, she wanted to believe David's performance of a devastated widower. She wanted to trust that he was simply broken by loss. But every time she looked into his eyes, she saw calculation instead of sorrow. His grief seemed too rehearsed, his words too polished. One night, while feeding her nephew, Mai replayed the weeks leading up to Anna's death in her mind. Anna had confessed to her in whispers, "Something feels wrong, Mai. I don't know if he loves me anymore." At the time, Mai thought it was just pregnancy hormones, exhaustion, or fear. Now, those words felt like a warning she had failed to hear. Her suspicion grew stronger when she caught David and Lisa in a quiet corner after the funeral. Their bodies just a little too close, their voices low and hurried. Lisa noticed Mai watching and quickly forced a smile, but the damage was done. Whispers grew louder around the building. Neighbors questioned why David seemed to move on so quickly, why Lisa was seen visiting him so often. Some said they had seen the two together before Anna's accident. Others wondered if the tragedy had truly been an accident at all. Mai confronted David one evening when he came to see the baby. "Why is Lisa always here?" she asked sharply. David froze, his jaw tightening. "She's just helping," he replied curtly, refusing to meet her eyes. But Mai saw the flicker of panic in his expression, and it confirmed what her heart already knew. Anna's death was no simple accident. Still, she kept her suspicions to herself. She knew accusations without proof would only make her seem hysterical. Instead, she began watching, listening, waiting for the truth to slip through the cracks David's mask. Meanwhile, David grew bolder, believing his performance had fooled everyone. He boasted to Lisa in whispered conversations, "They pity me. No one will ever suspect." But he underestimated the persistence of a grieving sister and the sharp memory of a community that had loved Anna. And soon the whispers of suspicion would reach the ears of the police, setting into motion a chain of events David could no longer control. It started with a single phone call. Mrs. Tran, the elderly neighbor who adored Anna, couldn't shake the memory of seeing David and Lisa together before the accident. She dialed the police anonymously, her voice trembling. "I don't know if it matters, but I think Anna's husband was seeing another woman." At first, the police treated the elevator tragedy as a mechanical failure. Accidents happened, cables snapped, and people grieved. But the anonymous tip sparked curiosity. Investigators began reviewing security footage from the building, examining the timeline of the night Anna died. What they found was unsettling. The cameras showed David entering the lobby with Anna, guiding her toward the elevator. But moments later, after the doors closed on her, he didn't panic or call for help. Instead, he calmly walked away, his expression disturbingly composed. One officer noted, "That's not the face of a man who just lost his wife." Meanwhile, Mai gathered her courage and visited the police station. Sitting across from the detective, she clutched her nephew in her arms. "My sister told me she felt unsafe," Mai whispered. She was scared David didn't love her anymore, and Lisa, her so-called friend, was always around. Too much. The detective leaned forward. "Are you suggesting this wasn't an accident?" Mai's eyes filled with tears. "I know it wasn't. I can't prove it, but I know. Please, find out what really happened." With Mai's testimony and the growing suspicions from neighbors, the police widened their investigation. They inspected the elevator more thoroughly, discovering that the cables hadn't simply snapped. They had been tampered with. The cut marks were deliberate, clean, and unmistakable. Detectives began following David quietly, watching his movements, noting his frequent meetings with Lisa. They interviewed residents, gathering stories of late-night arguments, whispered phone calls, and the coldness that had consumed his marriage. Piece by piece, the mask of the grieving husband began to crumble. David, however, believed he was still untouchable. At a dinner with Lisa, he smirked across the table. "They bought it. Everyone thinks it was just bad luck. Soon the money will come through and we can disappear." Lisa's laugh rang out, but her eyes darted nervously. She had heard the whispers too. She knew people were talking. "David, maybe we should be careful," she warned. He waved her off. "Relax, they have nothing." But the truth was catching up faster than he realized. One evening, as David returned home, he found two detectives waiting outside his door. They introduced themselves politely, their smiles thin. "Mr. Tran," one said, We'd like to ask you a few questions about the night of your wife's accident. David forced a look of shock and sorrow. Of course, he replied smoothly. Anything to help. Yet as they stepped inside, Mai watched from the hallway, holding the baby close. Her heart pounded with both fear and hope. She knew this was only the beginning. And as the door closed behind them, David had no idea that his carefully constructed lies were about to unravel under the weight of the truth. The interview with the detectives started calmly, but beneath the polite questions, David felt the pressure tightening like a noose. They asked about his marriage, his whereabouts that night, his feelings about Anna's pregnancy. He gave rehearsed answers, speaking with the perfect tone of a grieving husband. "She was my life," he said solemnly. "I don't know how I'll raise our child without her." The detectives nodded, jotting down notes, but their eyes revealed nothing. When they left, David exhaled in relief, convinced he had outsmarted them. Yet he didn't realize every word he spoke was being measured, compared, and cross-checked. Days later, the detectives returned with sharper questions. "Why didn't you call for help immediately after the elevator dropped?" one asked. "The footage shows you walking away." David froze, his mind scrambling. I was in shock," he stammered. "I didn't know what to do." But the explanation rang hollow. The detectives exchanged a glance, their suspicions deepening. Meanwhile, the investigation uncovered more damning evidence. Phone records revealed late-night calls between David and Lisa, sometimes lasting hours, often ending just before he returned home to Anna. Witnesses confirmed seeing them together, sometimes even holding hands. The picture of infidelity became undeniable. When confronted, David grew defensive. Lisa was just a friend. Anna trusted her. "We all spent time together." But his anger only fueled the detectives' doubts. Lisa, on the other hand, began to crack under pressure. When questioned separately, she fumbled, her answers inconsistent. Fear crept into her eyes as the detectives pressed harder. "Mr. Tran is a grieving husband," she insisted weakly. "He loved Anna." But even as she said it, her voice trembled. David sensed the tightening circle. He drank more, slept less, pacing the apartment like a caged animal. Every knock at the door made his heart jolt. He imagined whispers behind his back, neighbors watching him, Mai's sharp eyes piercing through his lies. Lisa grew restless too. "Maybe we should leave," she urged one night. "Before it's too late." David snapped at her. "Running will make us look guilty. Stop panicking." But inside, panic gnawed at him too. He dreamed of Anna's face, pale and broken, her eyes filled with betrayal as the elevator doors closed. No amount of whiskey could drown the memory. The detectives finally returned with a search warrant. They combed through his belongings, his computer, his financial records. David tried to act indignant, outraged at the intrusion, but sweat poured down his back. And then one detective pulled out a folder of insurance documents. David's signature glared up from the page. The policy had been updated just months before Anna's death, increasing the payout dramatically. "Convenient timing," the detective remarked coldly. David's mouth went dry. His carefully built mask was cracking, and he knew it. And when the detectives mentioned the word murder, David's composure shattered for the first time. The knock at David's door came early in the morning, sharp and unrelenting. He staggered to answer, still in his robe, his eyes bloodshot from another sleepless night. When he opened it, two detectives stood waiting, their expressions grim. Behind them, uniformed officers shifted into position. "David Tran," one detective announced firmly, "you are under arrest for the suspected murder of your wife, Anna Nguyen." David froze, his mouth dry, his heart hammering. "Murder?" he croaked, forcing a laugh that rang hollow. "That's insane. It was an accident." The officer stepped forward, gripping his arms. He struggled violently. "No, you can't do this. I loved her. She was my wife." His protests echoed down the hallway, drawing neighbors from their doors. Whispers filled the corridor as people watched the so-called grieving husband being dragged away in handcuffs. Mai stood at the end of the hall, her baby in her arms. She said nothing, but her eyes locked on David's with unflinching fury. For the first time he saw no pity, no hesitation, only the silent judgment of the woman who had seen through his lies all along. At the station, David was shoved into an interrogation room. The detectives placed the folder of evidence on the table. Phone records, surveillance footage, the tampered elevator cables, the insurance policy. One by one, the pieces painted a picture too clear to deny. You had motive, the detective said coldly. You had opportunity, and you had help. David's jaw clenched. This is ridiculous. Lisa is just a friend. You're twisting everything. The detective leaned closer. Then why did witnesses see you with her before your wife's death? Why were you on the phone with her minutes before the accident, and why did the elevator show signs of deliberate sabotage? David's face turned pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Across town, Lisa was being questioned as well. Fear had eroded her bravado. Her voice cracked under the weight of the detective's pressure. I didn't touch the elevator, she insisted. It was David's idea. He said it was the only way. I just did what he told me. The betrayal cut like a blade. Back in the interrogation room, David slammed his fists against the table when the detectives revealed her confession. She's lying, he roared. She's trying to save herself. But the damage was done. The mask of innocence he had clung to was gone. His voice grew desperate, his composure unraveling with each passing second. As he was led to a holding cell, cameras flashed from outside. News of his arrest had spread quickly, reporters shouting questions, neighbors jeering. The once respected man was now paraded as a monster, his reputation shattered. In the chaos, David caught a glimpse of Mai holding the baby outside the station. She didn't say a word, but the look in her eyes told him everything. Justice had only begun. And as the cell door slammed shut, David realized for the first time that freedom might never come again. Prison was nothing like the world David once knew. Gone were the polished shoes, the silk ties, the fine whiskey. In their place came steel bars, thin mattresses, and the constant stench of sweat and despair. The man who once played the role of a respected husband now shuffled through hallways in an orange jumpsuit, his wrists bound in chains. From the moment he entered, the other inmates sized him up. Some recognized his face from the news, whispering to each other about the man who killed his pregnant wife. Rumors spread quickly. That's the guy who pushed her into the elevator, someone muttered. Disgust followed him everywhere. David tried to carry himself with pride, but his arrogance crumbled fast. In the cafeteria, no one let him sit beside them. In the yard, men jeered, spitting on the ground as he walked past. To them, he wasn't just another inmate. He was lower, a traitor to his own family, a man who destroyed the very person who trusted him most. Nights were the worst. Alone in his cell, the silence pressed down like a weight. He couldn't escape the memories. Anna's terrified eyes, her final scream as the elevator fell, the haunting cry of his newborn son echoing in his mind, though he had never truly held the child. Sleep rarely came, and when it did, nightmares ripped him awake in a cold sweat. Weeks turned into months, and David's body began to show the toll. His hair grew unkempt, his eyes sunken, his once confident posture slumped in defeat. The guards barely looked at him, treating him like the worthless man he had become. Every letter he sent to Lisa came back unopened. Eventually, he stopped writing. She had abandoned him the way he had abandoned Anna. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, the world moved on. Anna was remembered as a beloved teacher, a devoted sister, a mother who gave her life for her child. Memorials continued at her school, her students holding flowers every year on the day she died. David, however, was forgotten by all except those who spat his name with contempt. Mai refused to visit him. She raised the baby as her own, pouring love into the child that David had never been capable of giving. She told her nephew stories of Anna's kindness, her sacrifices, her dreams. But she never spoke David's name without bitterness. Inside his cell, David felt the years stretch endlessly. He pressed his hands against the cold wall, whispering to himself, I didn't deserve this. I was supposed to be free. But the walls gave no answer. The silence reminded him of the truth. He was a prisoner, not just of the state, but of his own choices. One evening, as he sat on his cot, a guard appeared at his door. You have a visitor, the guard said flatly. David's head snapped up, hope flaring for the first time in years. His heart pounded as he wondered, could it be Lisa, finally returning? Or maybe his son, come to see him? But when the visitor stepped forward, David's blood ran cold. It was neither a lover nor a friend. It was someone who carried the face of the woman he had killed. 2 decades passed before David finally saw his son again. The boy Anna had died bringing into the world had grown into a man, tall, broad-shouldered, and carrying an intensity in his eyes that mirrored hers. His name was Daniel, though David had never once spoken it aloud with pride. David had spent years rotting in his cell, counting the days, the months, the endless years of regret mixed with bitterness. His body had withered, his hair gray, his skin sagging. Once proud, he now looked like a broken relic. Yet when the guard announced he had a visitor, a spark of hope flickered. Maybe his son had come to forgive him. Maybe there was still a chance for redemption. When Daniel stepped into the visitor's room, time seemed to stop. David's breath caught in his throat. The young man stood with quiet strength, his face composed, but his eyes burned with a fire that made David's stomach twist. "My son," David whispered, his voice cracking with desperation. He reached across the table, his hands trembling. "You came. After all these years, you came." Daniel didn't move. He didn't take his father's hand. He sat slowly, folding his arms across his chest, his jaw tight. Silence stretched between them until finally, Daniel spoke. "I didn't come here because I missed you," he said coldly. "I came because I needed to look into the eyes of the man who murdered my mother." The words sliced through David like a blade. He recoiled, his lips parting in protest. "No, it wasn't like that. It was an accident. I never meant—" Daniel slammed his fist against the table, his voice rising. "Don't you dare lie to me. I've read the reports. I've spoken to Aunt Mai. I know everything. You pushed her. You killed her so you could be with that woman. My mother died terrified, and you walked away." David's eyes darted wildly, searching for sympathy, for a chance to twist the truth again. "I was young, stupid, lost. I paid for my mistakes. I've suffered here every day." But Daniel leaned forward, his face inches away, his voice dripping with fury. "You think prison is suffering? No. Real suffering is growing up without a mother. Real suffering is watching Aunt Mai cry herself to sleep because she couldn't tell me the truth until I was old enough to bear it. Real suffering is knowing you were my father, and still, you chose betrayal over love." David's chest heaved as he tried to defend himself, but the weight of Daniel's words crushed him. His son's gaze was unrelenting, the reflection of Anna's pain staring back at him after 20 years. "I didn't come here for closure," Daniel said finally, his voice low and steady. "I came to promise you something. Your life isn't over yet, but it will be, and when it ends, you'll wish the elevator had taken you down with her." David's blood turned to ice as he realized his greatest fear had come true. His own son had returned, not for forgiveness, but for vengeance. The day Daniel left the prison visitation room, his heart burned with a fury that had been building for 20 years. He had stared into the face of the man who took everything from him, the man who murdered his mother, and he knew forgiveness would never be an option. Justice had been too soft. Prison bars were not enough. His father needed to feel the kind of pain Anna had felt, helpless, broken, and betrayed. Daniel spent weeks preparing. By now, David was nearing 60, frail and approaching the possibility of parole. But Daniel couldn't allow him to walk out into the world as a free man. That would be an insult to Anna's memory. Instead, Daniel made sure that every step David took inside those walls would become a torment. He contacted former inmates, men who owed him favors after years of building quiet connections through his work in community outreach. Daniel had chosen a path of law and discipline for himself, inspired by his mother's sacrifice and his aunt's guidance. But now, those connections became tools of vengeance. With a few discreet conversations, word spread through the prison. David Tran was not just another convict. He was the coward who killed his pregnant wife. The harassment began subtly. Food trays accidentally spilled over him in the cafeteria. His bunk was torn apart by unknown hands. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Baby killer, wife killer. Sleep became impossible as inmates banged on his cell bars at night, chanting his crimes like a hymn of hatred. David grew weaker, his paranoia eating at him. He complained to guards, but they dismissed him coldly. "You made your bed," one officer sneered. "Now lie in it." Even the guards despised him, fueled by the stories Daniel had ensured were circulating beyond the prison walls. Lisa, once his partner in betrayal, had long abandoned him. Daniel tracked her down too, exposing her publicly for her role in the crime. Her life unraveled, jobs lost, friends gone, her reputation destroyed. Every piece of comfort David once clung to was stripped away. leaving him truly alone. But Daniel wasn't finished. He knew his father still dreamed of parole, still fantasized about walking free one day. That dream was the last thread keeping David alive. So Daniel made sure it would be cut. He gathered testimonies, letters from Anna's old friends, neighbors, and even from Mai. Together, they painted David as a manipulative, unrepentant killer who remained a danger to society. When the parole hearing came, David shuffled into the room, his hands trembling, his voice shaking as he begged for a second chance. "I've changed," he claimed. "I'm a different man." Then Daniel stood, presenting the diary his mother had left behind, the entries filled with fear and sorrow. He read them aloud, his voice breaking but powerful. "He doesn't look at me anymore. I don't know if I'll survive this marriage." Gasps filled the room as the truth of Anna's pain pierced every listener. The board's decision was swift. Parole denied. David slumped in his chair, broken. His last hope had been destroyed by the very son he once tried to erase. And as Daniel walked past him, he whispered coldly, "This is only the beginning." Years stretched into decades, and prison became a graveyard of broken men. But none were more broken than David Tran. Once a man of ambition and arrogance, he was now little more than a husk, gray, frail, and forgotten. His body weakened with each passing year, but his mind suffered more than any sickness could inflict. Daniel's vengeance had been precise. He didn't want his father to die quickly. Death would have been too merciful. Instead, he made sure David lived long enough to feel the full weight of his crimes. Every year, new inmates learned his story. "That's the man who killed his pregnant wife," they whispered. Every year, parole was denied, his son standing in the hearing room with Anna's diary in hand, ensuring the board never forgot the truth. David's days became endless cycles of humiliation. Guards ignored his pleas. Inmates mocked him relentlessly. His meals were often spat in, his belongings stolen, his cell smeared with filth. He became the lowest of the low, a man despised by all. Even the cruelest criminals looked at him with disgust. At night, he was haunted by dreams. He saw Anna's face over and over, her eyes wide with terror as the elevator doors closed. He heard her final scream, the sound replaying in his mind until he woke drenched in sweat. Sometimes he dreamed of Daniel as a child, staring at him with accusing eyes, whispering, "You chose her death over our life." The loneliness was unbearable. Lisa was gone, vanished into obscurity, leaving him to rot. No letters came, no visitors arrived, except for the one he dreaded most. Every year Daniel returned, not to forgive, not to comfort, but to remind him. He would sit across from David in the visitation room, calm and composed, while David trembled. "You're alive because I want you alive," Daniel said once, his voice cold. "You'll die when I decide you've suffered enough." Those words became chains heavier than any iron. David begged his son for mercy, for even a shred of pity, but Daniel's eyes carried only the fire of Anna's memory. As the years dragged on, David's health declined. His back hunched, his hands shook, and every step sent pain through his bones. He was transferred to the prison infirmary, where the other patients turned their backs on him. Even in sickness, he was utterly alone. But death refused to come. He lingered in misery, clinging to life despite his body's protest. His once proud voice was reduced to a whisper, his mind a storm of guilt and madness. Sometimes he screamed in the night, crying Anna's name, begging her ghost for forgiveness. The walls only echoed his shame back to him. By the time David reached his 70s, he was unrecognizable. His eyes were hollow, his body skeletal, his soul crushed. Prison hadn't just punished him, it had erased him. Yet Daniel still visited, standing tall, reminding him with every look that his suffering was not over. And one fateful day, Daniel leaned in close and whispered, "It's time." David's heart froze, knowing his final reckoning had come. The prison infirmary was quiet that evening, the air heavy with the smell of disinfectant and decay. David lay in his bed, his frail body covered by a thin gray blanket. His breathing was shallow, each inhale a struggle, each exhale a reminder that his time was slipping away. For years he had begged for death to come quickly. Now, when it finally loomed, fear wrapped around him like chains. The door creaked open, and David's fading eyes flickered toward the sound. A tall figure stepped into the room, dressed neatly, composed, carrying an aura of authority that silenced the space. It was Daniel. Even after all these years, David recognized him instantly. His son's presence filled the room like a storm. Strong, unbroken, his gaze cut through David's weakness. Anna's eyes lived in that face, the same fire, the same quiet strength. David's lips trembled. "My son, please. I know I was wrong. I know I failed you. I failed her. But I've suffered enough, haven't I?" Daniel pulled a chair closer, sitting at his bedside. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied the man who had once thought himself untouchable. A man reduced to skin and bones, his arrogance stripped, his pride long destroyed. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice steady but cold. "You took everything from me before I even had a chance to live. You stole my mother's life. You condemned me to grow up without her. No amount of prison time can ever balance that." Tears spilled from David's eyes. His hands shook as he tried to reach for Daniel's arm. "I regret it every day. I hear her scream in my dreams. I see her face every time I close my eyes. I can't escape it. Please, I beg you, forgive me." Daniel leaned forward, his face inches from David's. His words were sharp, deliberate. "Forgiveness is something only my mother could give you, and you made sure she'll never have that chance." David sobbed, his chest heaving with the effort. "Then what do you want from me? What more can you take? I'm already nothing." Daniel's eyes softened, not with pity but with finality. "What I want is for you to understand that you don't get to die a hero. You don't get to die remembered as anything but what you are, a coward who destroyed his own family. That is your legacy. And it ends here." Silence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. David's breaths grew weaker, his body trembling as he realized there was no redemption left for him. His son would not carry his name, would not honor his memory. He would leave the world as he had lived his final years, alone, disgraced, forgotten. Daniel stood, towering over him one last time. "Rest if you can. But know this. Every breath you took after my mother's was a gift you never deserved." David's eyes fluttered shut. His final breath rattled from his lungs, and with it, the last trace of his existence faded. Daniel turned and walked out into the night, carrying not vengeance, but justice. For the first time in his life, he felt peace, knowing his mother's spirit could finally rest. So, my wonderful friends, the story has come to its close. And if you are still here with me right now, it means something in this journey has touched your heart. This tale isn't just about betrayal and revenge. It's about choices, consequences, and the power of love that endures even in tragedy. Life teaches us that no matter how much pain others cause us, we can choose how to carry it. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Daniel's justice wasn't about repeating his father's cruelty. It was about ensuring truth, dignity, and remembrance for his mother. We all face betrayals, disappointments, and moments when the world feels unfair. But the lesson is this: pain can either break you, or it can shape you into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Like Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Daniel turned his suffering into strength, ensuring his mother's memory lived on through justice, not silence. So maybe ask yourself, in the face of your own hardships, how will you respond? Will you let bitterness consume you, or will you rise above it with resilience and grace? If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. By doing so, you help us bring more heartfelt dramas that not only entertain but also heal and inspire. You've stayed until the end, and that means you're part of this journey with us. From my heart to yours, thank you.